Hello YouTube, welcome back. I'm Logan Albright and I'm here with another book review for you. Today I'm going to be talking about Humboldt's Gift by Saul Bellow. This was written in 1975 and won a Pulitzer Prize. It's also around the same time the author won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So very critically acclaimed. I had high hopes for it. Although I don't read a lot of 20th century American literature, I'm trying to stretch out, do something a little different. So I thought I'd check it out. This edition, of course, is the Library of America edition, hardcover. I always try to get these when I can with American authors. I think they're really nice editions. This comes in a lovely burgundy cloth underneath the dust jacket, and as you can see up here a little bit, I have a increasingly growing collection of these editions, and I hope to get more because I do think they're very nice and they're very uniform, and you can build a really good library out of them. There's two other novels in this volume. There's Mr. Semler's Planet and the Dean's December. Haven't gotten around to those yet, but I'll have to read them at some point. Humboldt's Gift is the story of a writer named Charlie Citrine, who's friends with this old poet who is Humboldt of the title. And Humboldt has died and left Charlie something in his will, and that's the gift of the title as well. It's a very slice of life kind of book. There's not a lot that happens in it. It's largely about the relationship between the two writers, the mentor and the younger writer. Their friendship, their hard times they went through. They had a lot of bickering and falling out. As one became more famous and the other became less famous. Charlie gets into a bit of trouble with a small-time gangster, which provides a little bit of comic relief for the story. I've heard people call it a comic novel. I didn't find it too funny, but there are a couple moments in it that are somewhat absurd and somewhat funny, so there is a little bit of that, although I definitely wouldn't call it a comedy. It's more of a drama. It's a very internal kind of story. It's all about relationships. It's about fame. It's about writing. It's about New York City and Chicago in like the 1960s and that whole scene. It's got a really very distinctive vibe in terms of that kind of literary scene, I think. Being written in the 1970s, it really does, you can feel like the bohemia of the East Village and of Chicago and places like that when you had these counterculture writers coming up. And you know, the main narrator has a play on off-Broadway that he's become famous for and that he's sort of made a lot of money off of. And the older writer of Humboldt resents him for his commercialization for selling out. Now, I read this book along with a couple other people, and I wanted to get a reaction from my sister, Audrey Albright, and see what she thought of the book. So here now is Audrey reacting to Humboldt's Gift.
It was boring.
Thanks for that commentary, Audrey. Insightful as always. Now, if you watch my channel, you'll know that I tend towards, my taste in literature tends towards the romantic. I like big characters, I like big heroes, big villains, big events. I like Moby Dick, I like the novels of Victor Hugo. I like a lot to happen. I like novels to be about important people doing important things. And the reason I don't read a lot of 20th century novels is that in that period, authors became very obsessed with realism. And they started looking at life as most of us experience it, you know. In most of our lives, there aren't big heroes and big villains. There's just, you know, everyday mundane things going on. And so the realist school tends to focus on that. And this book is very much of that kind of style, I think. Even though the author is somewhat rich and famous, or the narrator, rather, is somewhat rich and famous, the things going on in his life aren't that exciting or interesting. There's a divorce, there's, you know, relationships that have failed, there's his friendships that have kind of fallen apart. It's the mundanity of everyday life. There are no real good guys, there are no real bad guys, there's just people doing things, and everybody's sort of neutral and flawed. Which is realistic, you know, that's the way things are in real life, but for me, when I turn to literature, it's because I want escapism from real life, or it's because I want storytelling that's different from real life. I experience enough of real life on a day-to-day basis. I don't want the same thing in my literature. I want literature to be different from real life rather than reflecting it. So I like when authors exaggerate and heighten the reality of real life rather than trying to capture it in as much realistic detail as possible. So that's why I tend away from this school. And I think that Saul Bellow is very much of this kind of realist school of writing. He writes realistic, believable characters, and he writes them very well, don't get me wrong. I think he's a very good writer, and I think that he captures emotions, and he captures descriptions of scenery and places and events and time very well. It's very evocative. You can feel like you're there. But ultimately, the story doesn't really matter, right? Because nothing big happens. There's no big twist at the end. There's no like great defeat. There's no great triumph of good over evil or vice versa. It's just, things just kind of happen and then the novel just kind of ends. And while it's got a lot of interesting reflections on death and on failure and on writing, the ultimate point of the story seems a little bit lost to me because there's no just huge earth-shaking event that happens in the book. And I know that a lot of people like that, and if you like that, then great. I hope you enjoy it. But for me, These kind of books are a little bit dull, and I prefer the older, more romantic style of writing where you have heroes and villains and you do have things that really matter going on in the story. That's just my own personal preference. So that's what I thought of Humboldt's Gift. Very well written, but ultimately not quite my cup of tea because I don't like the modernist style of writing as much as I like the romantic style. That's just a personal preference. Although I will be interested to read the rest of this volume. It's got 2 other novels in there. I might get more out of those. I know a lot of people rate Herzog as his best work. A lot of people say Humboldt's Gift. So I'll read a few more and see what I think. That's what I thought of Saul Bellow. There you go. Thanks for watching, everybody. I've been Logan Albright. I'll be back again next week with another book review. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos, and I'll catch you next time with more books. Have a good one.